Violence has broken out in Northern Ireland for the first time since the 30-year period of violent unrest known as the Troubles. Youths have taken to the streets in predominantly Protestant areas in a wave of anger against what they see as the betrayal of the Brexit deal. But how much of a role does Brexit really play? Or are there alternative reasons for the violence? How does this tie into the political divisions between Unionists and nationalists in Northern Ireland? And does this bring the country closer to separating from the United Kingdom and Irish reunification? All that in this video. Just before we start, don't forget to subscribe for more political analysis videos and hit that bell notification while you're at it. The Troubles. The riots that began at the end of March in predominantly Unionist areas of Northern Ireland was the first time that mass violence broke out since the period of violent conflict known as the Troubles that lasted from 1969 to 1998. To understand the significance of these riots, we have to understand the background of the Northern Ireland conflict and the origins of its political divisions. Ireland used to be a British colony for hundreds of years, and the British introduced all sorts of oppressive laws that the Irish people didn't like, which led to a number of rebellions which were brutally crushed. On top of that, many British settlers came to settle in Ireland, mainly in the northeastern part of the island, and these British settlers were mostly Protestant, while most indigenous Irish people were Catholic. So when Ireland finally gained independence in 1922, the northeastern part of Ireland, Northern Ireland, which was majority Protestant, unlike the rest of Ireland, which was Catholic, remained as part of the United Kingdom. At the time of Irish independence, Northern Ireland was about 2/3 majority Protestant. But the Irish Catholic minority in Northern Ireland, as well as most people in the Republic of Ireland, wanted Northern Ireland to unify with the rest of Ireland. On top of that, the Protestant majority in Northern Ireland discriminated against the Irish Catholic minority. Irish Catholics faced discrimination in housing and employment. The police was 90% Protestant and unleashed police brutality on the Catholic population. And the Protestant government abolished proportional representation in favor of first past the post so that it could redraw the electoral boundaries in such a way as to keep Catholics out of power and maintain a permanent Protestant majority in the government. And this resulted in mass protests and violence that broke out in 1969, known as the Troubles. And this violence between predominantly Catholic nationalists who wanted to join Ireland and predominantly Protestant Unionists who wanted to stay with Britain continued until 1998. So the conflict was not necessarily religious in a theological sense. No one wanted to convert the other. Rather, religion was a marker of ethnic and political identity. Basically, it was a low-level civil war involving riots, terrorist bombings, assassinations, and armed paramilitaries like the nationalist IRA and the unionist UDA. Over 3,500 people were killed in this conflict and over 47,000 injured. Now in 1998, a peace treaty, the Good Friday Agreement, was signed and both sides laid down their weapons. The Good Friday Agreement states that people in Northern Ireland can have both British and Irish passports, that there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and codifies compulsory power sharing between Unionists and nationalists. On top of that, in order for there to be Irish reunification, a majority in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland must support reunification in a referendum. Unionist and nationalist politicians transformed themselves from violent organizations to legitimate political parties, fighting each other not with guns, but with votes. Of course, Northern Ireland is still deeply segregated. There are literally walls separating Protestant neighborhoods from Catholic neighborhoods in order to keep the peace. And this relative peace lasted until Brexit. On the 23rd of June 2016, 52% of the British people voted for Brexit to leave the European Union.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day!
But in Northern Ireland, 56% voted to remain. On top of that, the vote was split along sectarian lines, with 88% of nationalists voting to remain, but just 34% of unionists voting to remain. Unionists largely voted leave as a way of reaffirming their British identity, while nationalists voted remain as a way of reaffirming their Irish identity. But the Brexit deal which came was uniquely damaging to the peace agreement which had kept Northern Ireland stable for 23 years. Basically, Britain leaving the EU also meant leaving the single market and customs union. This would mean an end to the free movement of goods, services, capital, and most importantly, people between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which is still part of the EU. This would mean establishing a hard border with fences and customs checks between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, which would not only be a violation of the Good Friday Agreement, but it would inflame sectarian tensions in Northern Ireland. Nationalists do not want to see a hard border because they see themselves as part of Ireland. So as a solution, Boris Johnson agreed to the Northern Ireland Protocol. Basically, instead of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland would remain part of the EU's single market and customs union, which means that no customs checks would be required on the border with the Republic of Ireland. However, the rest of the UK would leave the single market and there would be border checks over the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. But the problem with this is that it angered Unionists who now feel that an artificial border has been created within the UK. This has resulted in complications at the border, with critical shipments of food from the UK being delayed. This would not only damage trade, but critically, they feel that their sense of British identity is under attack. They feel abandoned by Britain, and they feel that this brings them one step closer to Irish reunification, their worst nightmare. Ironically, Unionists are now most threatened by the Brexit deal, even though they originally voted for Brexit. Brexit has reintroduced borders in people's minds where previously none existed. The return of violence. With an artificial border across the Irish Sea, it was only a matter of time before sectarian unrest came bubbling to the surface. The customs checks at the Irish Sea border were temporarily suspended after threats against port workers. Some Unionist paramilitaries have announced that they are withdrawing from the Good Friday Agreement if the border across the Irish Sea is not lifted. And many of the Unionist youths claim to be rioting against what they see as abandonment by Britain. They see no future for themselves as a minority in a united Ireland. But Brexit is not the only cause of these riots. There is evidence that the violence is being influenced by criminal gangs linked to Unionist paramilitary organizations like the UDA and UVF. They wanted revenge on the police after they clamped down on criminality and organized crime. They used politics as a way to incite riots and mask their criminal activities. Another aspect is the controversy over the funeral of Bobby Storey. Despite Northern Ireland's strict coronavirus rules, over 2,000 people, including the Deputy First Minister from the nationalist Sinn Féin party, attended the funeral of an IRA intelligence chief in breach of coronavirus rules. Yet despite the violation, the police chief and the Public Prosecution Service said they would not prosecute them. This double standard led to anger among Unionists for two reasons. By not punishing the funeral attendants, the police was seen as being biased in favor of the nationalists. On top of that, while this IRA officer is seen as a freedom fighter by nationalists, he's seen as a terrorist by Unionists. If you saw people attending a mass funeral for someone you saw as a terrorist, you'd be angry too. The Unionist DUP called for the resignation of the police chief, but he refused to step down. And so in response, riots broke out in unionist areas. While all major parties, unionist and nationalist, have condemned the violence, it's clear that once again the temperature is rising in Northern Ireland. With a border down the Irish Sea, is it inevitable that we get a united Ireland? Irish reunification. With a border down the Irish Sea and open borders with the Republic of Ireland, this only strengthens the case for a united Ireland. As I mentioned before, Irish reunification is only possible if there is a majority in both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. 100 years ago, Northern Ireland was 2/3 Protestant, 1/3 Catholic. Today that number is 48% to 45%. Demographic changes mean that it is only a matter of time before Protestants, and therefore Unionists, lose their majority. At the last election, Unionist parties got 43.6% of the vote, and nationalist parties 39.8%. But if we look at the polls, 51% would support a referendum on reunification, with 47% supporting remaining in the UK, while 42% support reunification. This is significantly higher than in the past. Critically, for those aged 18 to 44, 47% support reunification, while just 46% support remaining in the UK, which gives a strong indication where the future is headed. Polls in the Republic of Ireland show that 65% support a united Ireland, but it's unclear what exactly would trigger a referendum. Would it be a consistent majority in the polls for reunification, or a nationalist majority in the Northern Ireland Assembly? But even if you had a majority on both sides of the border, a referendum on reunification would be extremely divisive, far more than Brexit. In fact, the worst-case scenario would be a reverse version of the Troubles. Instead of a Catholic minority fighting to secede and join Ireland, you would have a Protestant minority trying to secede and join the UK. You would likely have sectarian violence in a united Ireland. Any reunification agreement would therefore have to provide constitutional provisions to protect the rights of the Protestant unionist minority. This would most likely include some kind of semi-autonomous status for Northern Ireland, the right to a British passport for those who want it, and free movement with the United Kingdom, although this becomes difficult with Brexit. These protections would be necessary because Protestants fear that the discrimination that they once imposed on Catholics would be imposed on them as a minority in a united Ireland. Besides the potential for sectarian unrest, there are also other reasons that make reunification less likely. The UK provides Northern Ireland with £10 billion worth of subsidies. In a united Ireland, the Irish would have to subsidise the region, forming a net drain on the government's finances, which would be far more expensive for a smaller country like Ireland compared to a larger country like Britain. On top of that, the political instability created by Brexit means that both Irish and British governments are weary of a referendum in the next 5 years. Besides questions of identity, there are also practical considerations for people choosing to vote in a referendum. Joining the Republic of Ireland would mean losing access to the free healthcare provided by the British NHS. At the same time, economic growth is higher in the Republic of Ireland, which could help Northern Ireland's struggling economy. But that doesn't change that in the long term, the political winds are in favour of reunification. A new referendum on Scottish independence could boost nationalist sentiment in Northern Ireland, as could the recent rise of the nationalist Sinn Féin party in the Republic of Ireland. But ultimately, it is the slow march of demographics which will swing the balance in favour of reunification. So while it won't happen in the next 5 years, a united Ireland in our lifetime is very possible. Would you be in favour of reunification with Ireland or remaining part of the UK? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you to my Patreons, including Linda, Richard, Eisenskjold, and many more for making this video possible. Like, share, and subscribe, because this was my take.